Hey everyone, welcome back to the Sons of a Pitch, an American soccer podcast. I am your host, Nick Pateras, alongside my good friend and fellow host, Michael Yalmy, coming to you from Skype. We are going very, very technologically advanced here. I get to sit in my dining room. He gets to sit in his trailer on vacation. We're living the best life and talking soccer, aren't we, Mike?
Absolutely. Over in Miami for a conference a couple weeks ago. Now I'm down here got back to Chicago, drove the RV down to Florida to hang here with my parents and some old friends, living a good life, let me say.
And surprisingly, you're only on like your fourth or fifth drink right now, or am I overestimating?
Actually, it's the first, sir, because this whole Eastern time thing is really screwing with me. Normally, I'd start drinking around 5, 6 o'clock, and I'd be asleep by the time we got started recording, since it's 9 p.m. instead of the regular 8 p.m. Central. So first drink of the night.
Well, I'll make sure to edit out any snoring noises or anything like that if any of it comes up. So good to have you again, Mike. Listeners, if you want to join the conversation, you can follow us on Twitter at SOP Soccer, on Facebook at Sons of a Pitch Soccer, or on YouTube and just search for, go figure, Sons of a Pitch Soccer. We want to give a shout out to the I Believe podcast, who has following our conversations on Twitter, to Keisha Hancock and to Bernice Hennett, our latest Twitter followers, as well as to some of our November Facebook likes. Thanks to Hagen D. Custer, Jay Bedro, Alex Saronis, Marian Mantis, Zach Edward, Keith Buck Matuziak, and Giaxanakis. So thank you all for following us along on Facebook. And if anyone else wants to jump in, you can always email us, podcast@sonsofapitchsoccer.com, or follow along on the website at www.sonsofapitchsoccer.com. Also, Mike, his little pet project, has been putting together a swag store for us. So, Mike, why don't you fill us in on that info?
Absolutely. So find our website at sonsofapitch.redbubble.com. It will take you to our store. We have all kinds of different things. You're going to see the shop, and it will pop up anything. The thing that popped up for me tonight was a shower curtain. We've got clothing. We've got kids' clothes. We've got phone cases, stickers, wall art, home decor, stationery, everything you can think of. It's there. The sales are rolling in. People representing Sons of a Pitch Soccer Podcast out in the streets, helping our podcast grow by the percentage that we get to take home in profit and continue to put back into our product, which is free for you, the listener. So thank you for those orders, and jump on and get some more swag, especially with the holidays coming up, and support our podcast.
Absolutely. Get your small children in T-shirts that say Sons of a Pitch. I think everyone would appreciate that. So jumping right in now to the headlines from around the league, Mike, I think everyone around the MLS has weighed in on the Chicago Fire rebrand. It broke early last week after we recorded the last episode. Now it's our turn to give our candid takes on the Chicago Fire rebrand. We've had a lot of listeners from the area asking us to comment on this, and we put a few tweets out. And I think it's time now to take the Twitter filter off and just kind of let loose. And let's just discuss, in my mind, how terrible this new logo is. It is absolute trash. I have no more words to say other than it is absolute trash. I mean, it looks like a piece of garbage that someone crumpled up, painted red and yellow, and threw it on a logo. I mean, it's that bad. They keep trying to say that it was building off of the tradition and what it means to be from Chicago, and it's the city rising out of the ashes of the fire. Well, first of all, it doesn't make sense because the ashes aren't red and the flames are pointing down.
That's the embers of the fire.
The imagery doesn't even make sense, no matter how they want to justify it, Mike. First of all, where's the gold come from? Like, that has nothing to do with Chicago at all. Like, I'm confused, I'm befuddled. And what were your first impressions when you saw this logo?
Well, when I saw the logo kind of leaked on Twitter, I was like, wow, this is horrible. When they officially put it out, and seemed like it was a bit more of an oval shape, and then they kind of added the color scheme into it a little bit better, it kind of took my expectations from really, 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 really bad to really, really bad. So I think it's bad overall. The color scheme just doesn't work. One thing that I was kind of looking at from the color scheme is it's kind of RSL. The gold that they're saying is gold. It's not really gold. It's just kind of a nasty yellow. Like gold is LAFC. Maybe even like the RSL could maybe kind of call it a little bit closer to gold what they have. This is yellow, straight up yellow. And another thing is, dude, they straight up ripped off St. Louis. And look at all their stuff. It was these colors exactly from St. Louis's, all their branding on their website and their scarves and all that kind of stuff. Everything was these colors. And now Chicago comes in and swoops it in right before they can design something. I think it's absolute garbage. The crowns, they look like an upside down crown and a regular crown. And there's a lot of talk on Twitter about the Latin King's crown and that you can get shot wearing this stuff. I mean, it is Chicago, so depending on what part of the town you're in, you might get shot. It might not be because you have the logo on, just because you're there. But this is, I mean, overall, it's just a bad. If you're gonna redesign everything like this, go for scratch. Like, don't try to. First of all, don't keep the name Chicago Fire. If you're gonna completely rebrand like this, change it up. Go for something completely different.
It's FC now, not SC. It's they're the football club.
There's one positive to the FC that I will give them, and that's the fact that they can change their website now from chicago-fire.com to chicagofirefc.com, and it will work. That is the only positive I have of that. Look, I get some of the clubs are going with FC. I'm a big TFC fan. It's FC football. I prefer soccer. That's what it is here in the United States. That's the way it was in Canada when I was growing up in Canada. It was soccer. It wasn't football. I get why they do this, but come on. It's just something to just add FC to the end of this and rebrand a logo is just garbage. And especially when the garbage looks as bad as it does with this new logo. So overall, I'm really, really disappointed in it. I know the fans are extremely disappointed in it. It will grow. Fans will figure it out. This isn't something, I read a few tweets that, some people were saying, look, if you're going to jump ship based off of a bad logo for a team, you're really not a fan. And I agree with that.
Yeah,
you're not going to lose people.
These fans aren't jumping ship because of a bad logo. They're jumping ship because of terrible coaching, mismanagement of players, terrible fan experience, moving to a football stadium that charges you $40 minimum just to park. And then the logo on top of it was the last straw, I'm thinking. Actually, I got a friend of mine who's been a Chicago Fire season ticket holder for the longest time. He's a diehard. He's going to stick with them no matter what the case. And he was at the Soldier Field press conference. So they let him in. He got to go find his seats, pick them out. It was a really cool thing, he said, for the season ticket holders. But he saw the GM Rodriguez, and he yells out to Rodriguez, "You better not screw up the." And Rodriguez just looks at, we've got a few surprises, and well, he certainly wasn't wrong, Mike. This is certainly a surprise.
Absolutely.
But just some final thoughts on this logo, at least for me. When you have the fans doing artwork that looks insanely better than what this giant marketing company came up with, then you've done something wrong. I have not been able to find any positive feedback at all. I get it's the internet. No one says nice things. But I even went out and looked for newspaper articles, even like MLSsoccer.com. Like, they were very, very neutral as to their opinions on the Chicago Fire rebrand. Obviously, they're not going to talk against themselves, but
right.
They weren't exactly jumping all over to support it. There's nothing good from this logo. If I had to stretch it, I'd say, well, they're the only team with an oval, so that's unique. Good for you, Chicago. I don't know what else to say. That's all I got, Mike. So Fire fans, we hear you. We're with you. I guess winning cures everything, so we'll see if they actually can win anything.
Right, and they definitely have a great opportunity to do that and really rebuild their team with some of the moves that have been made, that are that are getting made in these coming days. So definitely some positives from that standpoint. Nothing from the logo rebrand and that new design, but I digress.
It's all right. It looks like the Fire have digressed a bit too. Moving on to our next topic, we want to recap the expansion draft here. We're actually going to talk a little bit about the Chicago Fire roster later, so you Chicago fans stay tuned. But we want to start with the expansion draft that occurred last week. You had Inter Miami picking first, and then Nashville picking second, and then they were alternating the picks from there on out. So Miami picked up Ben Sweat, Elvis Powell, Lee Wynn, Luis Argudo, and Brian Meredith. Whereas Nashville picked up Abu Danladi, Zarek Valentin, Jalil Anibaba, Brandon Vasquez, and Jimmy Madrana. So, Mike, you hear some of these names. These are like household MLS names. Sounds like these teams have made some pretty good selections.
Yeah, they weren't big name players. It wasn't the big names like Jesus Medina from New York City, who was available. Some of the other DPs who are kind of going out of contract and whatnot. So they're kind of household names, that those depth pieces that you're going to find throughout MLS, those experience. That's a big part of this too. What I find interesting is that Nashville kind of used this in a way where they picked out a few guys that they really liked, that they really wanted, and then they did some work afterwards with some of these guys that they picked up and shipped on to other teams to pick up other assets to use, such as the trade of Zarek Valentin, who they picked from the Timbers. They traded to Houston Dynamo in exchange for Joe Willis, a good, proven starting goalkeeper in MLS. Not the best. He's not gonna win any goalkeeper of the years anytime soon. At least I don't think. But a good, solid MLS keeper. And it's been proven over the past probably 5 to 10 years. You don't need a big name keeper to be successful in this league. So a good move there. The other trade that they made, Brandon Vasquez, who they picked up from Atlanta United, kind of a young forward who has a lot of potential, a lot of upside, and they picked him up, shipped him over to FC Cincinnati for $150,000 in TAM. I think they probably could have got a little bit more just based off of the potential, but either way, picking up $150K in TAM, that's very helpful in signing a big name player.
Do you think that Nashville had some of these moves in place? Like, I don't know how or what the rules are regarding talking about trading, because I don't think you can trade expansion slots. Like, you can't all of a sudden have another team come in and select within the expansion draft. But I got to imagine that they were talking to FC Cincinnati and Houston Dynamo at some point before trying to get this stuff set. And yeah, like we said, that Nashville did a great job. They picked up a lot of money during this expansion window here.
Yeah, absolutely. They're definitely talking with these other squads. They've got, there's I think about 2 or 3 days when the list of unprotected players comes out till when the expansion draft actually happens. So there's definitely time for these GMs to be talking to other clubs, and other clubs, somebody like Cincinnati, who maybe they're like, we really, really want Brandon Vasquez. Like, that's our guy. We'd love to get him. They know they wouldn't be able to get him from Atlanta. So they say, hey, Nashville, if he's available, let's talk. And then they'll say, well, we'll do 150K in TAM. And if you can pick him up. Now, if Inter Miami comes and takes him with the first pick, that's going to screw things up a bit. And that deal's not going to go through. So it's just kind of like a gentleman's agreement. To if it happens through the draft. But I'm sure I did hear some whispers kind of from Twitter and some newspaper articles that Jay Chapman, when he was traded to Inter Miami, that there was kind of an agreement in place with Inter Miami that they weren't going to take any TFC players. So they kind of took the value down on Jay Chapman a little bit, and that was part of the trade. So they're definitely
were they like paying for
other.
Protection? Like, they're paying for protection, yeah. lowered Chapman's value. That was it to save their other guys. Like, well, who else would they have wanted off of Toronto?
Oh, I don't know. You never know. who that would have been. But especially you don't know what Nashville's thinking. So if you can get one team to say, hey, we're not going to touch anybody, it's part of it, so it's part of the conversation.
But too, you got to remember though that once your team has a player selected, that's it. You're only going to lose the one player. So unless Nashville was like, we're going to take Josie or Michael Bradley or Osorio, I don't know if anyone else they can't live without. But it's interesting to see that, like, that if that was the case, then that they're having these gentleman agreements, some of these deals. All you MLS conspiracy theorists can be working overtime with these windows. That's interesting, Mike. I'm glad we've got the TFC fandom in you to tell us all these sweet little tidbits.
Yeah, right.
And similarly, listeners and fans of your teams, if you know any good little stuff like that, let us know. We're happy to share it. Again, tweet at us, direct message us at SOP Soccer on Twitter. Best way to get in touch with us, and we'll definitely read your tweets on the show, work your content in. We're happy to do that. One other thing I want to touch on Nashville, a player that has become, I don't know, what would you call him? Infamous on our show, Mike. Someone that we have chosen to maybe criticize a little more than others, fairly, unfairly. We'll let you, the listeners, decide on that. None other than left back Lovitz. That's right. The Montreal Impact All-Star best player. The Montreal Impact player and USMNT. Somehow he keeps getting on that roster.
Frequent USMNT call-up.
Yeah, right. He's got something on Berhalter. I think you said that last week. So Lovitz goes to Nashville. And Nashville, probably taking some of that money from that Brandon Vasquez deal, Nashville sends to Montreal $50,000 in GAM, $50,000 in TAM, and an international roster spot. Now, according to MLSsoccer.com and Bobby Warshaw, his article about this, that international roster spot is around $150,000 in allocation money. At least according to last season. So Daniel Lovitz went for $250,000 in allocation money. Does that sound right to you, Mike? I feel like he's way overvalued.
He is. He's way overvalued. There's no other way to put it. It is. I think that strictly comes down to, they spoke a lot about it during the expansion draft, where your wing backs, your left back, your right back, depending whether they're going to move forward a lot, even if they don't, that is a position of very low talent inside of MLS. So you've kind of got 2 or 3 guys who are really good at it. Then you've probably got like 5 or 6 guys throughout the league that are decent at each position, right back or left back. And then from that point back, it's just garbage. So I think he gets overvalued just because he plays that position. Because the talent on the field, I've never seen it. I watched this kid when he played for TFC. I watched him when he played for Montreal. I've watched him when he's played for the U.S. men's national team. I don't see it. I'm not like, man, this guy is just controlling a game down that flank. Oh, wow, these crosses coming in from Daniel Lovitz are amazing. Wow, he's making great defensive plays. I've never said that before in my life. So, yeah, I think he's a little bit overvalued, but I think it just comes based off the position that he plays.
Yeah, and what's interesting, in that article, it says that he made like $97,000 and some change in salary last year, and he wants to make more than that. So maybe that's why they moved him, because he was probably going to have to have some sort of contract increase. I don't know. Maybe that's another reason for the move. Like, rather than Montreal wanting to pay him, let's just let the next team come in and pay him. I don't know. The one thing that Bobby Warshaw speculates. Yeah?
No, if you can find somebody that's going to pay him that, great. Let him go. Look, everybody wants a raise. I can't find anybody that's like, you know what, I'm making more than enough money right now. I don't want any more. But, it depends on who's going to pay it. And if you can find somebody that's going to pay it because you're definitely not, move them.
The other part of that article said that, Thierry Henry, new coach, he wants his own players. He doesn't want to have to recycle guys. So if he can just accumulate as much allocation money and resources now, that way they can go into the spring and then the summer transfers with a lot of extra money to build their roster. So it is probably a good thing for Montreal to offload him. And I guess from a sense, you get a seasoned veteran and who can just kind of hold the left back position for Nashville while they build their roster. It's just, again, Daniel Lovitz, man, worth $250,000. Like,
he always continues to surprise us, doesn't he?
I don't know what it is, man. Who's his agent? We need to find out who his agent is. That guy needs a raise, first of all. That guy needs more press, because whoever it is, he's doing a heck of a job for Mr. Lovitz over there. Anything else you want to comment? Nashville, Miami, Montreal, Daniel Lovitz, Mike. We can move into some more specific rosters now.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what these two expansion teams have in store, building up into their first season in MLS, starting in just a few months. It is the end of November. Preseason kicks off in just under 2 months, so it'll be here before we know it. I'm excited to see what these two teams end up building here in the offseason to get started. But with that said, let's move on to some of the established teams in MLS, starting right off with none other than the MLS Cup champions. God, that hurts to say still. Seattle Sounders.
Yeah, so the Sounders, for an MLS Cup defending champion, 3 appearances in 4 years, 2 cups, 11 straight playoff. Everyone knows the statistics. Everyone knows how great a club Seattle has been in the MLS. They got a lot of work to do this offseason, Mike. A lot of their roster, a lot of their big-name players are out of contract, such as Kim Ki-hee, Brad Smith, and Harry Shipp. They have not had any extensions or new contracts taken care of. So I would imagine they need to bring back 2 of those 3 players at least. I think Kim Ki-hee, if I had to pick out of those 3, I think Kim Ki-hee is probably on the outs. Maybe they can, but I don't know if they can even get anything for him. If they bring him back in a re-entry draft and pick him up and then trade him again, but it doesn't look good for him, considering that Seattle has to make some big moves to shore up their defense. I think that was part of some of their struggles this season. Also, they declined the option on Roman Torres. He could be out of Seattle. This is a big season for Seattle's defense, especially, obviously, we all remember the loss of Chad Marshall early on in the season. So do you think they can do it, Mike? You think they can rebuild the defense in one offseason?
Yes, because they're the Sounders. Garth Lagerwey is a good GM. I don't have any doubts in what he's able to do, so I think he'll be able to pull it off. And it's the Sounders, man. This team they're always there. They're in the playoff hunt. They start out a season horribly. They're sitting on 20 points through July, and then all of a sudden they're the second seed in the playoffs. And I have no doubt in my mind they will figure it out. It still is an extended offseason compared to last year when we weren't even at MLS Cup final at this point in the year, and we've already been off now for a couple of weeks. So they've got some extra time to deal with it. I think they'll be fine. I think their biggest need is at center back, right, with Kim Ki-hee. That would be, if you got to retain 2 or 3 of those players you were talking about, I would say Kim Ki-hee is probably the most important to figure out. And then Victor Rodriguez. I mean, there's a lot of talk that he's possibly going back to Spain. As a guy who's probably going to try and capitalize on the MLS Cup MVP. That gives him some type of extra leverage. So if he goes back to Spain, you're losing your MLS Cup MVP, a guy who has been a very, very important piece for your squad. There's a lot of work to do for Seattle, but I have no doubts they'll get it done. What do you think?
I don't know what they're going to do, because Garth Lagerwey came out recently and said, yeah, we're in it to win the Champions League. He wants to go win CONCACAF Champions League and be the first MLS team to do it. And we know what's happened to Sporting Kansas City this year and TFC the year before, when they come off a really successful MLS season, are poised to make a run in the league, and then just get the snot knocked out of them in Champions League, and they get injured and they get tired, and all these other resources are expended. And how do you balance this huge tournament with the beginning of your regular season? The only way to do it is depth. And that's why TFC came so close in 2018's Champions League of winning the whole thing and then having a somewhat respectable MLS campaign. It's just they had depth. They had players they were at least too deep at every position. And with why am I blanking on their coach's name right now? Who's TFC's coach?
Greg Vanney.
Vanney knew tactics. He knew how to get the most out of his players. He could switch to that 3-5-2 if his defenders were dogging it or tired or whatever the case may be. So we're going to see. Seattle might just be into acquisition mode. Let's just get guys. Let's just build some depth and just keep that playoff streak alive. And, hey, maybe we'll just run our best players out at the beginning of the year. Like you said, Mike, longer offseason, more time to rest before Champions League. Maybe Seattle can make that run. Do you see them, though, competing with Liga MX right now?
Not with the holes they have with the guys, the contracts they've declined and where they're standing right now. Ask me in February when the brackets come out, and once we've got some signings under our belt, then I think it'll be a different story. But as of right now, can that squad that they have, they don't have the depth, especially after they've lost these players, but we just began the offseason. So I personally don't think any of these teams can compete with Liga MX. I think Toronto FC really, back in 2018, had an unbelievable run. I mean, this was insane. They took out Tigres, then they went and took out Club America, and then they were playing Chivas and went to, a couple missed penalty kicks is the reason. I mean, they literally missed a sitter. Marky Delgado missed a wide open net.
I think it was at your house. Time. We were drinking on the back porch at that one,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah, we were. And, they literally missed an open net to win Champions League. I think it would take something very, very special, especially anytime there's a salary cap in place with MLS. I think any MLS team is going to have a really hard time challenging Liga MX squads for the CONCACAF Champions League trophy. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna shift over to your side of the MLS Cup, Mike, but wrap up your CONCACAF thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, look, CONCACAF, when you have such a spending difference with teams that are bringing in DPs as, their third sub in a game, that would be a DP in MLS, you're going to have a hard time competing, especially over a two-leg system, especially having to travel to Mexico, play at altitude, something you're not used to. It's going to be tough for any MLS club to do that until they start spending the same type of money. Look, if TFC or Seattle Sounders or LAFC, if these teams can have 6 or 7 or 8 DP type players and 8 or 9 TAM players on their squad, like the teams in Mexico have, then they can compete. But until then, I think it's going to take something extremely special, like we saw with TFC, who had great depth, who had a superstar in Giovinco, who just recently, speaking of Giovinco, just won the Asian Champions League trophy with Al Hilal in Saudi Arabia, and won the MVP or the man of the match of the final. And this guy just missed CONCACAF Champions League. Now he goes over to Asia, wins this. So they had something pretty special there, especially with Josie Altidore and Michael Bradley a little bit closer to his prime than he is right now. So anyways, enough talk about CONCACAF. We'll have plenty of time to discuss CONCACAF and Champions League this offseason, especially once some more news comes out as far as brackets and things like that. But those are my thoughts on everything CCL.
So let's flip it now to the other side of the MLS Cup 2019. TFC. Mike, it's TFC kind of pulled a rabbit out of their hat to get to the MLS Cup Finals this year. It was a struggle all year, late push. Everything seems to kind of go their way during that playoff run. Game against Atlanta that they shouldn't. They lose a game to Seattle, which they probably shouldn't have either. Now what do you do in the offseason? What rumors are out there? There's a big one, Mike.
There is. So there is a big rumor out there right now. A certain Mario Balotelli, who has been this prodigy when he started with Inter Milan and playing for the Italian national team a few years ago, and then he kind of fell to the wayside of Mancini with Inter Milan, and then I forget where he got transferred to at that point, but he ended up playing at Man City for Mancini again, in the Premier League. Then he was kind of bouncing around the French soccer. I think he played at Nice. Then he was, now I think he's over at made a move back to Italy to play for Brescia, and he's kind of there's a lot of heat going on there in the Italian Serie A and Brescia, especially around racism. And there was kind of this interesting article I was reading about Balotelli being rumored to join Toronto, and it's like, well, I don't know if he's going to be ready to leave. He could possibly leave Brescia in January. Guess what? He's leaving Brescia in January. He probably will leave earlier because FIFA might even make an exception in his case, since his club president came out with this racist comment today about it, and they were asking about, Mario Balotelli and his struggles, and I forget the exact words that he used, but he was like, yes, he's black. He has a hard time, and like I forget what he said exactly. I gotta look it up now. But just a crazy racist comment from the president of the team he's playing for. If this guy ever suits up again for that team, I would be amazed.
Well, he ended up taking the ball in a recent game against Hellas Verona,
right?
Because the fans of Verona were chanting racist things against him. He just picks the ball up and punts it into the crowd and walks off the field. Like it was perfect.
That's probably the worst league in the world for the amount of racism, at least as far as the big leagues. I don't know how it is in the smaller leagues, or like, the little league in Poland, or, what I mean? I don't understand about those leagues, but as far as the big five, Serie A is the worst by far. I mean, it seems like it's every few months there's some type of, a player walking off the field because of, racist chants by the fans, racist comments. I mean, it's an issue there. And I really hope FIFA stands up and does something. I saw one tweet today about how Serie A should get banned as a league. It might be a little bit too far, but, there need to be some sanctions. Something needs to happen, serious sanctions. Not just, you have to play a couple games behind closed doors. That doesn't matter. I want to see, some big time, hefty fines, something, that would really make an imprint to these people, because it's unacceptable.
Right. You got to start docking points. You got to start levying serious fines, or, like you said, on top of all of that, play a closed game. That way, they're not making any money off ticket sales or concessions or anything like that. You got to get their money. It's the only way anyone will listen. But that would be pretty amazing. So Balotelli, yeah.
I think that could, that really heats things up as far as the rumors go, just because of, how unhappy he's been there. And you go to a place like the USA or Canada, which is probably the most progressive in the world when it comes to that. So that would be a great setup for him to come into. As far as TFC goes, I've seen some things about he wouldn't really fit in tactically with Josie Altidore, and I can see where people kind of get that, because he is a bigger striker, taller, he kind of does have the same game as Josie a little bit, but here are my thoughts on that. You're talking about Josie Altidore, who plays about 40% of the games because of injury and everything like that. Those games that they can play together, trust me, you're going to have no problem eating up two center backs with Mario Balotelli and Josie Altidore in play. So that standpoint, I think, has nothing to do with it. I think it all just comes down to whether or not Michael Bradley takes a TAM deal or less to free up that DP spot, as long as it's not a DP spot, and frees that up, then he might be able to get there. TFC will pay a ton of money. They know their issue right now. Management knows that they are one striker away from being a damn good team, from just taking another, probably winning another MLS Cup. If you can get a top-notch, big-name striker who has tons of talent, they're going to win MLS Cup again. I mean, they've got the midfield. They have the defense. A little bit shaky at times, don't get me wrong. and MLS goalkeeping is what it is. So I think if they can put a big name striker up top, they are that one move away. They've been in 3 MLS Cup finals in 4 years. So kind of in the same boat as Seattle. Seattle got, won 2 of them. We won 1 of them. So it should be interesting to see what happens. I doubt that Mario Balotelli is the only option. But if that doesn't happen, I think you'll see them on the move for a striker, a big name striker as well. Now, Mario Balotelli, as far as MLS goes, there is another team that's very interested in him, and that is the Montreal Impact, none other than TFC's biggest rival. So that kind of heats things up a little bit, and that's pretty interesting. I think you got a guy like Mario Balotelli that could go play in Montreal for a guy named Thierry Henry. That might be interesting.
Yeah, with Thierry Henry, you're not exactly sure what kind of style of play he's going to bring to the MLS. I mean, you can look at his track record of coaching and teams he's played on. We'll see how much he wants to tweak that to play with Montreal and to use the talent that's on the roster and what kind of players he wants to bring in. But, man, that would be a huge get for a first-year head coach for a Montreal team that is who want to claim that they're on the rise, that they are going to be making a push either in Champions League or in MLS play this year, who wants to win a few Canadian championships in a row and make sure that they're not just the little brother of Canadian soccer to Toronto or Vancouver at times. It would be a huge get. It would rejuvenate the fan base, and immediately the rest of the league would have to take them much more seriously than they've taken them in recent history. And for Balotelli, though, you go play for Thierry Henry. That is pretty appealing. But on the flip side, you go play for a guy like Greg Vanney, who's got proven systems, proven tactics. You get to go play alongside another major international player in Michael Bradley and on occasion Josie Altidore, with some other up-and-coming Canadian-type international stars. So you can see the appeal for the rosters and the coaching. You can see the appeal for the lifestyle, whether you're in Toronto or Montreal. It would probably be a great move for him. But for me, the big picture is if Balotelli, at age 29, who is still probably in the prime of his career, comes to the MLS, it would be a huge get for the league. And for him to be able to tell his entire network of players that he hangs out with, man, I love living in Canada. I love playing in the MLS. It's a wonderful league. Your quality of life is so much better. I mean, it could do wonders for MLS recruiting.
Yeah, and absolutely.
Yeah, so with that, everyone, that's kind of our take on some of the expansion news, what's going on with the defending MLS Cup champion and runner-up. We're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to do some quick hits on a couple other rosters and just give you a quick preview of the Nations League top 4, even though the games aren't going to be for a while. So stay tuned after this word from our sponsors. Hey everyone, welcome back to the second half of this episode of the Sons of a Pitch, an American Soccer podcast. And Mike, I'm really sorry I cut you off. You had some more TFC news. We got to make sure that the Kings in the North and all your other Reds fans up there get every little bit of knowledge from you about their club. So what did I interrupt you for?
You know what? You interrupted me for a good reason. That was to give our sponsor piece there with Donovan Food Brokerage and nice premium Iceland pure spring water. So definitely thankful to our sponsors for that. But the other TFC news that's out there was a couple other roster moves that they had. A rumor, still, it's not official, but it's just reports as of right now, but I can definitely see it being true. Free agent Drew Moore, the center back, the MLS veteran from TFC over the past few years. It looks like he is going to be re-signing with the Colorado Rapids, his former squad that he ended up moving to TFC from a few years ago back in 2016. So it looks like he'll be going back to Colorado to pair back up with Robin Fraser as the head coach, who was the former assistant from TFC. Definitely a good move from his standpoint. He's going to make more money there than he is at TFC. TFC's trying to shed a little bit of that salary. He was on about 350, 375K per year. So he wasn't going to get anywhere near that from Toronto for playing, in about 10 games this season, based on injury and just selection. He's not quite what he used to be. So he's going to be going back to Colorado and playing for them. So that's the other interesting TFC news.
Well, let's stick with Colorado for a quick second because they ended up getting Lalas Abubakar. He was on loan from Columbus and then signed with them. So to be able to pair him with Drew Moore, that's a solid backline already taking shape for the Rapids. And then you throw in Austin Trusty, Keegan Rosenberry, who continue their development. Colorado should have a pretty good defense this year, Mike.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you just think about that. The veteran leadership of Drew Moore, somebody who can really lead the young guys, and they have plenty of young talent there along the back line for Colorado. So that's a great move there. It'd be a very good back line to have Drew Moore, or say an Austin Trusty, who's being mentored by Drew Moore, in with Lalas Abubakar. So good moves there from the defensive standpoint for Colorado.
Absolutely. And Lalas Abubakar, I didn't realize he's only 24 years old, Mike. I figured the way he's played in this league and the years he's had here, I figured he was much older than that. But nope, he is only 24, the Ghanaian international there. He's got a bright future, and man, Colorado looks like they have a bright future as well. That's a team that we're going to have to really give some thought when we start doing our preseason picks a couple months from now. They get a couple more signings. They bring a little bit more offense. They could be making some noise in the Western Conference this upcoming year. So nice work to the Rapids front office so far. The other team we want to mention is the New York Red Bulls. They've had a lot of speculation about what they're going to do, like they do every year, because they always have a wonderful regular season, and they're always, fans are ready. This is it. This is the year we win the cup. And then something happens where they crash and burn in the playoffs. That's so Metro. That's so Red Bulls, whatever you want to call it. And it's finally looking like they're going to kind of turn the page of the current Red Bulls era and maybe try something new. We all know that the best player on that team is their system. And no matter what coach comes in from that organization, that they play the same style, that they out-hustle, they press high, they win the 50-50 balls, they quickly counterattack. But they've just decided to not re-sign legend Bradley Wright Phillips. So do you think that's a sign they're going to try and change some of their strategy?
I don't know if it's going to be a complete strategy change, but definitely is an interesting move because BWP, although he was starting to come off the bench a little bit this season, I mean, the guy is a proven goal scorer at the MLS level. So kind of a head scratcher there. I don't know if he's quite done yet. He is available in the re-entry draft, so it'd be interesting to see if he wants to still play in MLS and he can find a suitor to see what he has left in the tank. But not re-signing him, I mean, he is a club legend. I mean, this is a guy who has scored over 100 goals, I believe, and that's a big piece to be taken off the squad there. So pretty interesting move from New York, but they've done it before. I mean, this is a team who, with Dax McCarty, they let him go. He ended up going over to Chicago. Then they had Sasha Kljestan, right? He was kind of the centerpiece of that midfield. Then they let him go to Orlando, and he's kind of fizzled out since then. So, they're not afraid to make the big moves. Move. Yeah, for sure. So they're not afraid to make the big moves. And this is another one where you're kind of like, wow, that's a pretty big move there to lose a player of that caliber.
Yeah, well, first of all, Mike, he did score 100 goals. How could you forget the goal celebration when he hit 100? Because he wears number 99. When he scored that 100th goal, he took his shirt off to reveal a jersey with the number 100 under it.
Right.
So, yeah, Bradley Wright Phillips is sitting on at least 100 goals. But, yeah, maybe they do pick him up in the re-entry draft. Maybe this was just kind of a salary shed to dump him and see if anyone else takes him or they get him back. So the Red Bulls right now are actually, though, picking 13th in the re-entry draft. So he may be available. He may not be available. There's certain rules and parameters on the re-entry draft. So just quickly, you got to be 23 years old and have played at least 3 years in the MLS, and your options were not picked up by our club. You will be available at your option salary of 2019. If you're 25 years old and have a minimum of 4 years MLS experience, you can also join the re-entry draft. as well as free agents who want to participate can join the reentry draft. So there are a few qualifiers for it, but again, it looks like most players who aren't getting picked up by their teams can enter the reentry draft. So that's something to watch for. Maybe there's a few guys like that, or a few guys like we talked about before the break that from Seattle who might be available. Something to watch out for.
Right.
But the other bit of
little note here on Bradley Wright Phillips is a report on MLSsoccer.com that apparently the New England Revolution were interested and met up with them in Foxborough and were kind of talking about things. But apparently New England now is going to pass in the reentry draft because of possible lingering health issues. So that's an interesting note to have out there, that maybe he's got some issues going on, with his knees, legs, that's causing teams to kind of think twice about bringing in a proven goal scorer like BWP.
Yeah, you never want to have your career end for you. Like as a player, you always want to make that decision yourself. But it might be age and injuries are what are the deciding factors for BWP. The other bit of news from the Red Bulls, Aaron Long, rumored to be courted by Southampton of the English Premier League. So it's possible that he ends up over there with some quality minutes for a struggling EPL side. You think Aaron Long should take that deal if they offer it to him?
I'm not sure, because that's a guy who is... I think if Southampton was not in the relegation zone and wasn't going to look like they had a good chance of dropping come the end of the Premier League season, if they were kind of mid-table, I would say it'd be a lock that he would go over there and play for, a team like that in the Premier League. But the fact that they might be dropping down to the Championship at the end of the year could change things a little bit, especially from the standpoint of a player looking to sign. So, I think he might pass on this one just based on the team that's looking at him. But I don't know, anytime you get a chance to play in the Premier League, and especially if there's going to be minutes available, that's something you have to look at from a development standpoint.
Well, hey, Aaron Long, USMNT teammates of Tim Ream, who's playing for championship side Fulham. So I don't know if that is going to sway him at all to possibly go overseas, even if it is for a championship side. But something to keep an eye on if you're a Red Bulls fan. Or USMNT fan, because you do want to see him take the next step in his game. Final thing on the Red Bulls, their star defender Kamar Lawrence has been rumored to be asking for a trade. I don't know if he's just posturing because he hasn't been able to get a contract extension or get some extra money for as well as he's played, or if he really does want to get out of Red Bulls and go to a team – I don't know, go to a team that's going to contend for an MLS Cup or a US Open Cup, go to a team overseas, maybe play in the English Championship or the French division. I don't know. Kamar Lawrence, Mike, where do you think his future is? Is it here in MLS?
I hope so, because he's definitely one of the best wingbacks in the league. So I really would like to see him stay in the league. I think that he definitely is probably top three at his position. So it's a guy who's fighting for MLS best 11s. So I'm hoping he stays within the league, and I would think he probably will. But another note with the Red Bulls is another name that we didn't mention here is Luis Robles. He is no longer part of the Red Bulls. So things are kind of shifting there, from the standpoint of their veteran players, guys that have been around for a long time, even, their star players like Bradley Wright Phillips, like Luis Robles. So maybe that has something to do with his thought process, is saying, get me out of here. We're kind of jumping ship right now. Maybe he knows something about the ownership that we don't. Maybe ownership is kind of like, we can't seem to win anything anyway, so let's just cut our salaries, cut our losses, and it doesn't matter really what kind of team we put out there. The fans don't show up to Red Bull Arena unless it's like, a huge playoff game. That place never gets sold out. So I don't know. Maybe there's something we don't know.
That's a good analysis there, Mike. Yeah, it remains to be seen what the Red Bulls are going to do. And just a final thought on Kamar Lawrence. The guy's 27. This is the prime of his career.
Yeah.
If it were me, I would not want to be with the Red Bulls in their current situation in the prime of my career. Whatever my ceiling might be, whether it is Premier League, French League One, championship level or MLS, like whatever that ceiling is, if these are the best years of my career, I would not want to be sitting on a dismantled Red Bulls team. The next team we do want to look at, like we said before, early on in the show, our hometown team here, the Chicago Fire. Similar kind of to the Red Bulls, or as we said it on the podcast a few episodes ago, the expansion side Chicago Fire FC. They have parted ways with Nico Gaitan, Bastian Schweinsteiger, and Nemanja Nikolic. All three of their DPs are off the books. Alexander Katai, Dax McCarty are also gone. Katai, they're not picking up his option. McCarty was traded to Nashville. So that's some big TAM contracts off their books. Some other few names, goalkeepers David Ousted and Richard Sanchez, gone. They did not have their options picked up, as well as defender Diego Campos had his option declined. So a lot of names that you know from Chicago are gone. They will not be making the trip to Soldier Field. That opens up a lot of money for the Fire. And we've talked about that they can go out and sign some big players, maybe some Mexican internationals like Chicharito or Guardado. Mike, are the Fire looking to go young? A lot of their ads, a lot of their marketing stuff has been like some of their big name academy players. One of their players they have the rights to, who's still in college, just had a hat trick in the NCAA tournament. So the Fire could be looking to go young and just develop for a year or two. What do you think?
No way. And especially if Nelson Rodriguez is still in town as the GM or whatever his reduced business role is, they're going to trade that guy who just got that headline for like $50K in GAM next week. All right. Just because he got some type of recognition and they might be able to get a little bit more out of him. They have traded all of their homegrown talent away, except for Jordy Mihailovic, which he's kind of looking overseas now as well. He's training overseas, I believe, with FC Nuremberg, so a decent-sized club over there in Europe. They don't seem to go young, and you can't go young right now. You just cannot. I mean, this is a team who is completely going just a complete wash of what they were into this new identity. And yeah, I just said they've always gotten rid of their young guys, but when you're moving a club into Soldier Field, you have new ownership, you have a complete new rebrand. Even if it's as ugly and gross and trash as it is, it's still a big rebrand. They're going to spend some money. They have got to put a big-time player out on the field, multiple big-time players out in the field to start drawing 40, 50, 60,000 people a game to Soldier Field. You can't go young. You can't bring up the homegrown players when you're trying to attract a brand-new fan base in the city of Chicago. Because let's be serious. You're going to have the diehard fans. We've talked about it a million times. You have the diehard fans that are going to Bridgeview. They'll go to Soldier Field. That's what they are. But they need to start attracting a different fan base, and that is the city itself. And yeah, I'm sure there's some supporters that travel out from the city to Bridgeview, and now it'll be easier for them to make that trip to Soldier Field. But this is a team that is in a complete spot right now where they have to bring in the big name players. They have to go for it. They have to try and put a winner on the field, because if you put out a team that's number 8, 9, 10, 11, not really in the playoff run in the Eastern Conference for the next 2 or 3 years based on youth and whatnot, it's going to be a complete loss, and they'll end up moving out here to Naperville to play at the college, because they have to put a big-time product, especially when you got Schweinsteiger, Nikolic, and Katai. All three DPs are gone, and Nico Gaitan gone, who was a TAM player on a pretty high salary. They've got plenty of money to spend and plenty of spots to utilize. I can't see Mansueto, with all of this money that he's putting in with the rebrand and moving to Chicago and buying out that lease in Bridgeview, he's going to spend some money. Hey, you never know. Maybe this whole Mario Balotelli thing to TFC or Montreal, maybe it's to Chicago, right? I mean, we really don't know. But I really, truly expect a big-time player to be signed, if not multiple big-time players to be signed by the Chicago Fire FC here in this offseason.
Yeah, and the more I think about it, you're right. The Fire can't go young because they have been dumping their pieces, and the Fire organization has been criticized for not having their own academy. So you're right. It would be extremely difficult for them to try to develop young talent at the MLS level. because by then the stakes are too high. You're losing games that mean something, and maybe maybe this is going to be part of a new stadium complex, training facility, 5 years down the road for Mansueto and the Fire organization, that they do get an academy set up. Hopefully that's something that he can bring to Chicago and just draw and reap the benefits of all the talent that the city and that the state of Illinois and there's tons of talent in Northwest Indiana. Growing up in Northwest Indiana for a large part of my life, there's some good soccer players there, and Chicago knows it too because they had a few guys from Indiana, Gutman, who has been moved all over because of the Chicago's mismanagement of their player, and as well the prospect who we said scored the hat trick, Victor Becerra, playing for the Hoosiers in a 3-0 victory over Kentucky. It was his hat trick. So,
right.
You know what? You've kind of changed my mind a little bit. That the Fire probably aren't going to go young because they're not set up to go young. And one last bit on their logo, I looked up Mansueto's company Morningstar, his investment company, hedge fund, whatever it is, and their logo is pretty plain. It's the word Morningstar with like an oddly shaped O and a kind of a funky S. So apparently logos are not his thing. He can do everything else right. Make billions, buy sports teams, rejuvenate a brand, but he can't get a good logo.
Hey, you know what? That's fine. Let's just get through and get a good team here on the field. And I'm telling you, in a market like Chicago, and you kind of hit the nail on the head with the academy. If they can get an academy built, a training complex built, the amount of talent that's in Chicago. I mean, we're talking about the third, well, it's not third anymore, but I think fourth largest city in the United States. It's a huge city. There's so much talent to be had here. I mean, you have to start to go after that type of talent. And look, you've got squads like TFC, like Seattle. They're not bringing in a ton of homegrown players and giving them a ton of minutes, but they're making money off these guys. And then the odd time you're going to have a guy like a Jonathan Osorio or Jordan Morris come through that are going to be big-time players for you in the league. So they have to start looking at that. But right now, the biggest onus for them is get a winner on the field, because if they have a team that will win, hey, back in 2017, I went to that TFC Chicago Fire game, and the place was jam-packed. They had to put some little bleachers over in the fire pit or whatever they call it over there in the corner under the, kind of where they put the stage for the concerts, because they had it was sold out for weeks. If you have a winner, the fans will come. So that has to be their number one thing. Get a winner on that field.
Real quick, just to kind of wrap up the headlines of the show, the Nations League inaugural tournament is almost over. The group stages have ended. We've got our top 4 teams: Mexico, the United States, Honduras, and Costa Rica. The semifinals are set. Mexico will face Honduras, and the United States will play Costa Rica in June. So you got a few months before that happens, and then obviously the winners of those games will play each other in the inaugural Nations League final. So keep a lookout for some of the international moves. Maybe the United States will have a much different roster when the games are really high stakes at that time. That's everything on my mind, Mike. I just want to wish our listeners a happy Thanksgiving holiday. Thank you to all of listen to us. Thank you to our who support us. Mike, any closing as we wrap up this week?
No, just Nations League, that top 4, Mexico, USA, Honduras, and Costa Rica. Could have called that one a few months ago when these groups came out. The best teams won. The best teams are in to set up the best semifinal matchups and final matchup going forward. So that's good for CONCACAF. Also, happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy it. I will be enjoying it with my family down here in Florida before we make the trek back up north to Chicago. And maybe we'll get together next week and actually record in person, since we've been doing the Skype thing for a while.
Looking forward to it, Mike. You enjoy the rest of your trip. Have a safe trip home. Listeners, again, join our conversation on Twitter at SOP Soccer. Online, you can email us, podcast@sonsofapitchsoccer.com. Facebook, Sons of a Pitch Soccer, YouTube, Sons of a Pitch Soccer. Let us know what you're thinking. Let us know what you want to hear. And as always, enjoy all the soccer in the United States, America, and beyond. Thank you, everyone.